Yeah, Emil has another topic suggestion. If Donald Trump were, if he still were to be the president of the United States, will he then prevent the Ukraine situation? Oh my God, I don't, I don't know. What do you think, Christopher?
Well, it is a complicated topic, exactly the Ukraine situation, and I have to admit it's not a situation that I know that much about. But I mean, there has been this sort of, we could say, controversial issue of the relationship between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin of Russia. And I know that the mainstream media has, in the past, criticized Trump for being on somewhat too friendly terms with Putin, it seems, or even admiring him, I think the media accused him of doing. And of course, they have this very famous allegation that the Russians sort of helped Trump win the election in 2016, which was a very famous allegation made by the left, it seems. So perhaps someone could imagine that because Trump and Putin would be on somewhat more friendly terms than, say, Barack Obama, that or Joe Biden for that matter, that would make it less likely that there would be this Ukraine situation, that there would be some way that the countries, Ukraine, Russia, and the United States and NATO perhaps could reach some agreement or compromise, and that Trump could play a role in helping that happen. But perhaps some would argue that still now we have Joe Biden, and he does not seem like a character who has been willing to go that path, or not competent perhaps to go that path, or not willing. Um, so for me, this might be more of a speculation, but I suppose someone could argue that with Trump, things could have turned out somewhat differently. Um, but again, it's more speculations on my side.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know very much about Trump or Putin personally, and I also don't care that much about like individual people kind of gossip, to phrase it negatively. But I certainly don't see anything bad with leaders of different countries being on friendly terms. I think that's a very good thing. So I don't see anything bad in that. I would say in general, just my kind of thought on this whole situation with Russia and the Ukraine. Um, the NATO has been pushing further and further towards the Russian border, I think for the past 30 years. I'm not exactly sure. I think after the collapse of the Soviet Union, after the fall of the wall in Berlin, there was a sort of agreement between the Western countries and Russia that there should be an area between the two which neither one of them controls. And NATO has broken this agreement multiple times by including more and more Eastern European countries into NATO. And so I think we were talking about proverbs in the beginning, and there is some kind of proverb like uh, "Don't anger a bear" or something like that. Don't go and provoke a bear, because you will get hit on the head if you do. And so that's a little bit my thought on this whole situation. I think Western countries, and particularly probably the US, but Western countries in general, have become very arrogant and have been feeling like we are on top of the world and everybody has to do what we want and how we want it. And so they haven't respected the that Russia is also a large and strong country, and you can't just push them further and further without there being some form of reaction. And so I think if you would respect other countries' territory and also their sphere of influence and their interests, then such conflicts could perhaps be avoided. But that's just my general thought on the topic.
Yes, I agree with your assessment there. And also, it's interesting that you brought up that Proverbs, because Russia is often symbolized by a bear. So it's sort of fitting in this very specific way as well. Yes, I agree with that. I think we have the Western world being, and I'm not talking about necessarily the people living in the Western world, but rather the politicians, the mainstream media, the, academia, etc., are, as you said, it seems like they have this arrogant attitude that we are so great and good and Russia is so bad, very bad, we have to sort of hate them or condemn them. And it seems like mainstream media has been very strongly condemning Russia in very strong terms. Now, of course, you might argue that, well, Russia did really something wrong by invading Ukraine and it should be condemned. But still, I don't think necessarily that the mainstream media have a very rational and open-minded basis and then reaching a conclusion that Russia is evil, but rather that they have this general attitude toward Russia to begin with, and they don't really seem to be willing to have some more nuance. Because we have seen this in the past. We have seen this with, say, climate change, where the mainstream media seems to be this extreme alarmist machine of propaganda that says, oh, we are really going to be destroyed in a couple of decades or something. And they have been demonizing Donald Trump famously. So it's sad that they have this attitude, and it's not really based on a rational assessment, it seems to me. And the thing about Russia also, it seems like there is this ideological conflict in a way, because Russia is somewhat more conservative in some areas compared to the West. And there are these different values to a certain degree. Now, Russia is still very modernist and liberal in several ways, but it is in some particular ways more reactionary to the Western liberal or progressive agenda or movement, you could say. And therefore, since we know that the progressive movement in the West seems to condemn those who would be skeptical of them or their ideology, it seems natural that they would also be against Russia. But again, I think it's more nuanced. Russia is not necessarily meant to be this very conservative platform, but it seems like there is this tendency of the West to view it very negatively because of these slight ideological differences here and there. And someone has pointed out that it seems very strange that the West has severely condemned Russia, but not China. But China has very deep problems with doing bad things to its people, and many people have pointed that out. But it seems that the Western world treats China much more friendly compared to Russia, and that is something that people have pointed out as a severe problem. Though I'm not an expert, of course, and I don't know that much about the whole issue, but from from my impressions, I could say, things are not good in the sense that people are doing things in the rational and nuanced way, you could say.
Yes, I think these are very good points that you brought up here, and I think perhaps also part of the problem is that Russia is, in some sense, first of all, as you said, I myself also, I am not an expert. These are just kind of my thoughts and impressions, but I feel like Russia, at least the western part of Russia, is in some sense and has often been interacting with Europe. So it's kind of similar to Europe, but at the same time different. And this could also have to do with what you said, and that in some areas of life they have a more traditionalist way of doing things at the moment compared to the West, and that of course the kind of ideology of the West, this liberal ideology, cannot really tolerate someone else doing it different but still being okay, especially if this other culture is in some other areas quite similar to the Western culture. Whereas China is so different that you can say, yeah, they have a different way of life. That's the liberals can't really complain that much about that because it's just very different. But if Russia is in some sense similar to Europe, but then do some things different, then it would kind of sting the ideology, the mainstream ideology today in the West. And also, I wanted to add that some people in kind of in the alternative media or conspiracy theory section, they seem almost to be like great fans of Russia and think that everything is great in Russia and bad in the West. And this is not my position at all. I think there are severe problems in Russia, one of which being extreme censorship and also political censorship, that different political views are not allowed but are sometimes persecuted. So I am not a great fan of Russia. What I'm just saying before is that you should treat a big and strong country with the respect or with the holding back that they deserve, and not just feel like you can just walk over them. And also, as you said, the mainstream media is not, they seem very biased, and it's just like, yes, we are the good guys and they are the bad guys. And this is a very unproductive way of looking at the world, and also very dangerous. And I think it's much better to first look at your own defects and faults, and then look at what some other country or people or group is doing. And so we have been talking about the Proverbs, and there is this great quote from the Bible that you should first take the log out of your own eye before you care about the spleen in the eye of your brother. And this is kind of, I think, what the West is very much not doing when talking about Russia. They're only looking at the problems, that the bad things that Russia does, and then we do everything good, and that's of course false.